Hester was just a girl in the village school when one day a pretty young lady came in to ask the schoolmistress if there was any scholar there who could work as a nursemaid. Hester was very proud when she was called up and described as a steady, honest girl with poor but respectable parents and good at her needlework. She was soon employed and settled at the parsonage, just in time before the young lady's baby was born, a girl who became known as Miss Rosamond. Her father was a hard-working young curate in a large scattered parish over the Westmoreland Fells, and her mother a granddaughter of Lord Furnivall in Northumberland. Sadly, when little Rosamond was 4 or 5, both of her parents died within a fortnight. Her father contracted a fever after one of his long rides, and her mother passed soon after, following the birth of a stillborn baby. She had asked Hester on her deathbed never to leave Rosamond, which Hester was happy to do, as she was already devoted to the little girl. The mother's wish must have been written into her will, as after the executors and guardians had come to settle affairs, Hester and Rosamond were sent to live at Furnivall Manor House in Northumberland. The manor house was inside the gates of a large wild park at the foot of the Cumberland Fells, a mountainous wilderness. Both Rosamond and Hester, who was only 17, were intimidated by the massive stately home where they met Miss Furnivall Senior. The tall, thin lady, probably about 80, was partly deaf and constantly accompanied by her lifelong maid of a similar age. They coldly welcomed the two girls, but over time Hester and Rosamond became close to the other servants, in particular the footman's wife, Dorothy, and soon the whole household loved the new little girl. Rosamond ran and explored all over the house, except for the east wing, which was never opened. She loved the old state drawing room where hung the family portraits, including one of Miss Furnivall, then called Miss Grace, who had been a great beauty when young. But, Dorothy confided, her older sister Maud had been even better. If Hester and Rosamond could keep a secret, she would show them her portrait. As a safeguard, Hester told the talkative Rosamond to run and find a hiding place, then help Dorothy move a huge painting that leaned with its face against the wall, seeing in it again the same great beauty and also scornful pride as in the first portrait. Dorothy seemed half frightened at having revealed it and quickly moved it back, telling Hester to go and find Rosamond, as there were some sinister places around the house. Hester, still a child herself, ran off to continue their game of hide and seek. As winter drew on, Hester started to notice some strange occurrences around the old house. She often heard a noise as if someone was playing on the great organ in the hall. When she asked Dorothy about the music, she seemed to turn white with a look of fear, saying that Hester had merely heard wind in the trees. Hester was definitely hearing music, so wondered if Miss Furnivall was playing the organ, but when she peeped around and opened it, saw that it was all broken and destroyed inside. Finally, the kitchen maid, Bessie, let slip that folks rumoured that it was the old lord playing on the organ, as he had done when alive. After that, Hester tried to ignore the music, which seemed to become more stormy and morose with the darkening days. One Sunday, after returning from church with Bessie, Hester could find Rosamond nowhere. The household went into a panic, with young and old searching every room and cupboard. Hester was upstairs when she looked out the window and saw quite plainly 2 little footsteps which could be traced from the hall door and around the corner of the east wing. Hester ran outside to the bitter cold and started following the footsteps, which were heading up to the fells. She eventually saw a shepherd coming down the hill, bearing something in his arms wrapped in his cloak. He asked if she had lost a bairn, and there was Rosamond, lying still and white, seemingly lifeless. Hester carried her home, holding her close, feeling life seeped back into her limbs and sat by her bed all night while she recovered. In the morning, Rosamond recounted how a little girl had beckoned to her from outside, then taken her by the hand and led her around the east corner. Hester sternly replied that she had seen only one set of footprints, but Rosamond had insisted that the girl had led her up the fell path to some holly trees where she saw a woman weeping and crying. The woman stopped when she spotted Rosamond, smiling proudly, embracing her and lulling her to sleep. No matter how much Hester doubted Rosamond, she went over the same story again and again. When Miss Furnivall summoned Hester, she thought she would definitely be blamed for the incident. However, when she repeated Rosamond's account, the reaction was astonishing. Miss Furnivall threw up her arms in horror and begged Hester to keep Rosamond from that evil child who would surely lure the girl to her death. Hester never dared to leave her out of her sight again in the large rambling house, whether she had to venture near the phantom music or not. One night they were playing in the great hall when Rosamond suddenly cried out that she could see her poor little girl outside in the snow. Sure enough, there was the tiny figure, ill-clothed on such a bitter night and with a dark wound on one shoulder, mutely crying and beating against the window panes as if she wanted to be let in. Rosamond was flying to the door to open it when suddenly the great organ thundered out so loud as to make Hester tremble. Despite the crashing music stunning her into terror, Hester clutched Rosamond before she got the hall door open and dragged her kicking and screaming into the kitchen. When the sobbing Rosamond told Dorothy that Hester would not allow her little friend to come into the house, a look of ghastly terror on her face made Hester's blood run cold. Dorothy ordered Bessie to shut and bolt the back kitchen door fast. What with the phantom organist and child, the next day Hester stated to Dorothy her wish to take Rosamond to live with her at her father's house in Applethwaite. However, she had no legal right to take Rosamond, and so Dorothy finally told her the origins of the chilling hauntings at Furnivall Manor House. She had first heard the tale from old neighbours before folks even stopped visiting the hall. The old lord was Miss Furnivall's father, a proud man with two proud daughters, Grace and her older sister Maud. No one was good enough to wed them, but the two haughty beauties both fell in love with the same man, a handsome European musician whom their father hired to play every year at the house and teach him to play the organ he had imported from Holland. While Lord Furnivall practised, the young musician was walking abroad in the woods with one of the sisters, sometimes Grace and sometimes Maud, who won him in the end. He and Maud were married, unknown to anyone, and before he made his next yearly visit, she had given birth to a baby girl in a farmhouse on the moors. At this time, her father and sister Grace thought she was away at Doncaster races. Because their marriage was secret, Maud's husband decided that he could have the best of both worlds and started courting Grace. Meanwhile, the infant girl stayed at the farmhouse, where her mother rode her horse to see her at least once a week. The old lord went on playing his organ, became infirm and had to start walking with a crutch, while Grace and Maud grew apart, living in separate wings, Grace on the west side and Maud on the east side, those very rooms which were now shut up. Eventually, the musician stopped visiting, and Maud was left a deserted wife, but fancied that, with her father's decline, she could now bring her daughter to the house to be with her, on the pretext of being a favoured cottager's child. However, clues gathered by the servants within the household indicated that Maud eventually mocked her sister, telling her that the now absent musician had only pretended to love her, that he was indeed her own husband. Grace was heard to say many times that she would have her revenge. One fearful night, just after New Year and in blustery snowfalls, there was a great and violent noise heard. The old lord's voice, cursing and swearing, the cries of a small child and a fierce, defiant woman, the sound of a blow followed by moanings and wailings dying away on the hillside. The old lord informed all of his servants that his daughter had disgraced herself, and that he had turned her and her child out of doors, and that no help, food or shelter was to be given to them. Grace stood by him, white and still as stone, then heaved a sigh as if her work was accomplished. The following day, shepherds found Maud, crazed and smiling, nursing a dead child with a terrible mark on her right shoulder, who had perished in the frost and cold. The old lord never played his music again, and passed within the year. After Dorothy's account, Hester became more frightened than ever, and continued to watch and guard Rosamond, nightly bolting doors and windows well before dark, while the girl still heard the phantom child crying and mourning, and begged to let her in. One night Hester was summoned to Miss Furnivall's room to assist with some sewing, and carried the sleeping Rosamond with her wrapped in a blanket. Suddenly Miss Furnivall stood up to her full height, raising a warning hand and claiming to hear a scream and her father's voice. Rosamond awoke and struggled to get free of Hester, who followed Miss Furnivall out to the great hall, where the screams were even louder and seemed to be coming from behind the locked doors of the east wing. All at once those doors gave way with a thundering crash, and the apparition of a tall grey-haired man drove forth a beautiful woman with a little child clinging to her dress. Rosamond screamed that they were the lady and girl she had seen, and strained and begged to be free to join them. However, when she saw the man's uplifted crutch, she swooned away, as Miss Furnivall cried out to the spectre to spare the innocent child. But another phantom shape emerged, a young Miss Furnivall herself, with a look of relentless hate and triumphant scorn, as the uplifted crutch came down on the right shoulder of the ghost girl. The young Miss Furnivall looked on, stony and deadly serene, as the real Miss Furnivall collapsed, stricken down by the palsy. She was carried to her bed that night, never to arise again, and her last words were, "Alas, alas, what is done in youth can never be undone in age."